Today, we're going to walk through how to set up a small business securely and how to grow that small business securely. So in our overview here, we'll talk a little bit about mindset, because a lot of people think from the get-go when they think about security is not complete, does not encompass everything. But there's a lot more to it, and that's kind of why we're having some trouble with getting that thought process pervasive through a lot of small businesses. We'll talk about equipping your business from the get-go. So starting out with, how do you find your hardware and your software? And then once you find that, how do you secure that hardware and software? And then one of the things that's kind of unique to small businesses versus giant corporations is really being able to work from everywhere and having anywhere be your office without some supporting infrastructure somewhere. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. And then once you've got your footing, once you've got your business started, what do you need to think of as you grow in that business? So how do you make decisions? How do you bring on new employees? How do you grow your services and infrastructure securely? And the thought behind this is really, you might not necessarily be at any of these points very particularly, but the idea behind this is to give you that knowledge that you can use to say, okay, well, Chris told me this, and I'm not quite there, or I've already been there and I'm past that now, but at least I can understand kind of what my mindset should be at and where I should be thinking in securing my business. So with that, let's talk a little bit about mindset. A lot of things when people are trying to secure their business, they think about securing systems, and they're thinking about, oh, I just need to get antivirus and a firewall and I should be good, right? Well, unfortunately, that's kind of a 1990s way of thinking about security, and we've long left that behind. There are so many different ways that attackers act that would completely subvert those two systems, that we've got to think broader and deeper than that. So the biggest thing is to think more on the information itself and not necessarily on the systems. The systems are a tool that processes and stores the data, but the data itself is what we're more concerned about in most cases. So what kind of sensitive data you have? Think about that. Do you have personally identifiable information? The answer to that is yes. Everybody has personally identifiable information if they're a business, whether it's your own, your employees, your customers, partners, something like that. You have that. So that's the one thing that pretty much every business has in common. Beyond that, do you have things like financial data? Do you take credit cards from your clients? Do you take payment cards? Do you handle financial management? Do you do anything that would require a client or an employee or a contractor to provide you with financial data? Are you healthcare? Do you have health data? Or what we would call PHI, or protected health information? Do you store that anywhere? A lot of people might say, well, I really don't. But think about your employee files. Do you provide health insurance to your employee? That potentially, depending on what you are keeping from their sign up or any kind of changes that they make throughout their time of employment, you might have PHI there, even if you're not a healthcare related company. But if you are a healthcare related company, there's a good chance that you are processing or storing PHI. And then kind of, finally, the big one to think about is, do you have trade secrets? And this is a little bit, some people might think about this and some people might not at the small level. A lot of times our businesses are just built on providing services or creating a product, and that product may not necessarily be anything sensitive, but do you have your 11 herbs and spices or your Coca-Cola recipe that you're trying to protect? And you might think, well, that's kind of unfounded, but there are companies in Arkansas that do have sensitive data like that. So keep all of those in mind, and that's really what we're trying to protect here. We might be trying to protect systems in some case if you do have connected systems that are controlling things. Like think about if you are working, in HVAC management. Maybe you are an outsourced provider that manages air conditioning and heating for a larger facility, and those systems that you're connecting in there could potentially be breached to affect those different facilities, or power grid or something like that. That's kind of the caveat for when we do need to protect the systems over the information. But when we think about what we're protecting here, kind of back to the information side, we're really protecting three aspects of this information. We're protecting the confidentiality of it, or we're preventing that information from being seen or known by someone who should not see or know it. So in the case of PHI or PII or anything like that, you don't want everybody to know that information, so we need to protect the confidentiality of it. Integrity, probably slightly less understood than the confidentiality side, but integrity is more of the I don't want somebody to come in and change something and make me or make the data owner make an incorrect decision based on wrong data. So if you've got data that's feeding in from a sensor or something like that, and you're making decisions based on this, you don't necessarily want that data to be corrupted, so you need to protect the integrity of that data. And availability is the one that's the least understood. You need that data. Somebody needs that data at some point in time at a certain place to be able to make a decision. And if that data is not available to them, then they can't make that decision. So the data is of really no value to them. So you can think about things like ransomware causing a loss of availability. It's encrypting it to prevent you from using it, so you don't have that data when you need it to make a decision or take action within your business. And then a couple other things to think about is what I'll usually call the leasts. And this is just a big mindset that we need to have when we're thinking about how we provision systems and access to our systems and data. And that's least privilege and least functionality. Least privilege means I want to give my users the least amount of privileges on those systems and to that data that they need to do their job. So we don't make everybody an administrator on the network just because that makes life easier. We need to give them the least amount of access that we possibly can. And least functionality is kind of along the same lines, but we don't need to have every piece of software installed on every workstation just because it makes life easier. We want the least amount of functionality on there. So if you have a workstation that is being used by an HR person, maybe you just need Microsoft Office on there, and you need to prevent them from installing things like Spotify and TikTok and all sorts of other things on there. So the more things we have on a computer, the more vulnerable it becomes. And if those things that are installed on there don't give value to the business function that we're performing, then they're just adding risk for no return on investment, to put that into business terms there. Okay, so continuing on the mindset track here, like I said, we need to prioritize information and not systems in most cases. There is a caveat I mentioned if you are, kind of managing a control systems or something along those lines, and you do need to think about the systems more than the information. But in most cases around here, 99% of the people are dealing with sensitive information that they need to protect. Next up, the biggest thing that kind of shocks a lot of folks when we talk to them for the first time is that you can't just do a few things and consider yourself good and for the rest of time. Threats are always changing. We've changed how we do things considerably just in the 7 years I've been doing this in small businesses. But if I think back to 2004, when I first started in cybersecurity, completely different then. The threats were totally different. We didn't have a concept of ransomware. Phishing wasn't really a big thing, and those are really the two big things that I'm concerned about with my clients on a daily basis. So we've got to adapt. We have to monitor and see what's happening in the security world, and we have to change the way we look at that fairly regularly. And then when we think about managing risk, it's not just we want to remove risk. That's not the only option we have here. That is the first one on the list. Remediation generally means that we remove all the risk in there. So we've patched a software flaw. We have changed configuration to turn off a service or something like that. But that's not always the best solution. There's other ones like mitigation, where maybe we can't replace an outdated computing system because that runs a key function in our operations capacity in our manufacturing plant. And so we have to put mitigations in place to restrict access or to shut off portions of that may be more vulnerable than others. And so we can remove some risk, but not all risk. So maybe we mitigate that 20% or 80%, but it doesn't always go away. Transference is another one. Kind of two big ways we can transfer risk in the IT world is through insurance. So we buy cyber insurance policies that will help us through breaches and provide us some functionality to prevent them, but also will give us money to recover if something does happen. Another method of transference is choosing cloud-based solutions over on-premises based solutions. So if we are to use systems in the cloud, we're transferring a lot of the risk from like the physical risk and the power outage risk and backup risk and things like that. We're transferring a lot of that to that cloud provider. So instead of you having to run a server in your office and provide power to that server and air conditioning to that server and an always on network connection, maybe you run that server in the cloud. So the only thing you really have to worry about is whatever application is running on there, that's running and accepting the information that you need to put into it. So, think about having an email server in your office versus using Office 365 or Google or something along those lines. Risk acceptance kind of goes along with mitigation. We mitigate the risk and then we'll accept the remaining risk and say, hey, this is just something that as I'm making decisions later on, I have to understand that there's some risk there and I have to make those decisions cognizant of that remaining risk. In some cases, you can accept the risk outright, but we talk about, okay, knowing what that is, a good risk acceptance means that I understand what the risk is and I'm willing to accept that that risk is there because there's risk in everything. So we do this fairly regularly in our personal lives as well. But we understand what the risk is, we know it's there, and we make future decisions with that knowledge. And then finally, avoidance. This is one we rarely ever talk about, but sometimes we do this without even thinking we're doing it. Imagine if you were wanting to take on a new line of business in your company, but that new line of business brought a unreasonable amount of risk with it, and you're after you reviewed it and you looked at the risk, you measured it, you compared it to the lower risk current lines of business that you're running in your business, you just said, hey, it's not worth the hassle, it's not worth the effort, so I'm going to not pursue that new line of business. That's risk avoidance. All right, so that's the mindset. So kind of think along those lines as we're going through equipping your business, securing your systems and services and so forth. Keep those in mind and hope that kind of shows a little bit about how securing your business is broader than just installing antivirus and a firewall. We will talk about those, but that's just a small part of it, as you'll see going through the next couple of sections. But first, let's talk about equipping your business. And when we talk about that, we talk about how you're going to buy hardware and how you're going to buy software and services. And I lump software and services together because this is kind of becoming more of a fuzzy line between the two as a lot more things move to cloud-based. So we might not necessarily be out looking for software that we're going to bring back into our office and install, but we might be looking for services that are offering financial management or email or office apps or something like that. So on the hardware side, there's a couple of things up front that we run into when we're dealing with, we bring new clients on, or we're talking to people who are taking on an outsourced IT and cybersecurity service for the first time. But that is in kind of, where do you get your hardware from? And the one biggest thing I can recommend when you're out buying new computer systems for your business is to use the known and reputable brands that you see. I can't really say these are American-based brands, because pretty much every one of these builds their systems somewhere else, but these are American-owned companies. They have a lot more controls in place to ensure that you're getting what you think you're getting, because you're thinking with an American mind. So from a Windows standpoint, think of companies like Microsoft. They have hardware lines now in their Surface tablets and laptops and desktop computers as well. Dell, long time. If you've ever worked for the government, you would probably think that the U.S. government keeps Dell in business, but Dell's a very reputable brand. HP as well. And there's other ones out there that you might see and you might think, okay, these are fairly reputable. These are just the ones that we see mostly in business. If you are a Mac fan, Apple is also on that list. We do see a lot of folks picking that up. We usually end up supporting a lot more Windows than we do Apple, but we do have folks that do have some Apple devices. And as long as you understand that there's going to be differences, those also work well from a security standpoint in your business. Things to think to kind of stay away from is, I know a lot of new business owners are looking for that really sweet deal. They're trying to find a way to equip their business with lower cost systems. And I would very much recommend staying away from, companies like Huawei and other Chinese companies that, we just can't be real sure of how much those are going to be able to be secured from a hardware standpoint. And we might think hardware is hardware, but realistically, you can do a lot of stuff in hardware without anyone knowing, and that is frankly one of the big fears in the Department of Defense from a national security standpoint, is that we're going to end up with a rogue chip in a device or something that was intercepted before it was sent to a military base to be installed for national security purposes. And so you should worry about the same things on the hardware that you buy for your business. You don't have to have investigative units or anything in there, but you're just, it's one of those where if you buy from a known good, then there's a much lower chance that something nefarious is happening in the background. When you look at these brands and you're looking at which systems to buy from those brands, always look at the business line. And this is kind of one of those foot stompers that I want to make too, because we have a few clients that just insist on going and buying the cheapest bottom shelf thing from Best Buy or Walmart and then sending it out to a construction site, and it gets broken in 6 months. Or they buy the cheapest low-end laptop and it's not performing very well 6 months from now. But if you look at the business lines of these, then you're much more likely to get something that's more in tune to be used in a business environment. And a lot of folks don't really understand the delineation between consumer grade and business grade, but it is there. There's a lot of stuff on how the systems are built and also the software that's on them. So from a operating system standpoint, the business line Windows computer is going to come with Windows Professional. So if that's 10 or 11, it's going to come with the professional version of that. And this allows you to fully encrypt your hard drive. It comes with BitLocker built in, but it also allows you to connect to a domain. So if you do grow and you bring infrastructure into your office, it will allow you to connect that computer into a centrally managed domain, which makes securing your workstations immensely easier when you get to that point. So you might not think that's very important as you're a one-person business working out of a coffee shop, or a two-person business working out of someplace like the Little Rock Tech Park, but as you grow, you might run into a point where it's like, I have to have this managed, and now I've got to go buy myself a whole new computer because I didn't get the right one. Another big thing too is that a lot of these business line systems come with a lot less bloatware. So you're not going to get all these silly games. You're not going to get all these kind of drive-by garbage apps installed on there. And so it's just going to be a lot cleaner. Windows isn't the best at keeping that completely clean, but the business lines are immensely better than what you buy from Best Buy that's out there for the consumers to get to use at home. Talking about Apple, there's not really a delineation from Apple. There's not an Apple business to Apple personal. The software on Apple's is considerably less complex and bloated than Windows can be. Apple doesn't come with a lot of cruft on it out of the box. Actually, it doesn't come with any cruft on it out of the box. And all of the functions that are available are like the full disk encryption and all that kind of stuff are available on all of their stuff. So you have a little bit less to worry with than Apple. I mean, I'm an Apple user, but that's not some kind of veiled plug for Apple here. It's just, people prefer what they prefer. But just know that you're not going to have that same delineation if you're out buying an Apple. Just stop by the Apple store and pick up what you want with a little less worry. But if you're a Windows user, definitely look for those business lines. And with the Microsoft Surface, you have to be a little bit more discerning because they don't have a very distinctive line there. Whereas with Dell and HP, they have entirely different models that are slated for business versus what's slated for personal use. So the only other thing to add to that is when you are purchasing from these places, if you are trying to save a little bit of money, places like Dell, I know we use Dell quite a bit, and they have small business models, and then they have kind of the regular business lines. So you can kind of look at the delineation there. There's like Dell Vostro versus Dell Latitude. And those are a bit different. Dell Vostro is a little bit more inexpensive, but you can also look at refurbs. And Dell and Apple both have stellar refurbished stores where you'll buy things that will look like they're new and feel like they're new. So don't feel like that you're picking, when you go to the refurb section, you're picking something like you would at a thrift store or something. They're actually very well cleaned up and maintained. Apple sells only their newer things in the refurb store. Dell will actually go back pretty far. So be careful when you're buying that. Don't get something too old. You want something that's you're going to buy it. It's going to be new. It's going to be supported for several years down the road, not I'm going to buy something and it's going to be unsupported a year later. Microsoft, I believe they have a refurb store for their Surface line as well. I'm not positive on that, but any of these brand names are reputable. They have solid business grade or can be business grade systems there. So I would start there and just be a little bit careful if you're going to go kind of delving off into those unknown or very, very blatantly Chinese or Asian type brands. Not a knock against any of that. It's just that's one of those kind of things that we worry about from a national security standpoint. That's kind of trickling down into regular business now. As we could have a whole class on information operations and how different cultures work, but that's not. We don't have time for that here. So moving on to software and services, along the same lines from hardware, we also want to use known and reputable brands in software and services. And this is a little bit broader in that you're not just buying a laptop or a desktop. You're looking at cloud-based services. You're looking at software you're going to download. You're looking at things that are a little bit of a mix of both. So you have to be a little bit more discerning here and look at those brands. And we say, look at known and reputable brands. If you're out looking for a financial management platform, kind of the big one there is QuickBooks. So start with QuickBooks and Intuit and see if that works for you. There's some other ones out there, but the further you get away from known and reputable, the more likely or the less likely things are to be as secure and solid as you want them to be. Even big known brands. We've got a client right now that we're working on a SOC 2 assessment platform, and the company just will not pony up to how they're doing things, and they're a perceived as a reputable national level company. And I'm talking with the business owners and their decision makers, and it's just like as much as I would assume that they would be good, they don't want to play ball for the very specific compliance you guys need. So you need to move on and look at something else. So look a little deeper on the software and services when you're doing this, and do a little bit further investigation for these kind of things, especially when you get into very unique industry specific software and services that you're looking for. But kind of from the top down, everybody needs an email and an Office suite for the most part. This is a big one for us. We've taken a lot of folks on, and one of the first things we want to do is migrate them off of some kind of smaller and maybe outdated service and get them onto something a little bit bigger, more well-known, more securable. And so when we're talking about email and Office suites, we usually want people to be on Microsoft Office. From a security standpoint, Google Workspace is okay. There's a lot more that you can do to kind of fit into normal American business if you're on the Microsoft Office suite. But either of them is kind of a personal preference there. But there's a lot of little things like Rackspace, Hosted Exchange, or Zoho, or something like that, where they're kind of dragging along an older implementation of something, and they're not ending it just because they've got clients on there and it's revenue for them, so they don't want to turn it off. But recently with Rackspace's Hosted Exchange, they had a pretty massive breach because they really stopped supporting it because they weren't selling anything new, so they didn't want to sink any money into it. And one of the recent Microsoft Exchange breaches hit them hard. And so their response was just, hey, we got breached, we're shutting it down. You got to go find something else now. This isn't worth us fixing this, which was kind of a telling tale of, how much they really cared about that. So my recommendation is go to the people who do really, really care about what they're doing, and that's Microsoft Office and Google Workspace. Both of those are flagship products for those companies, and so they're going to pour effort, they're going to pour people and resources into them to make sure they're secure, make sure they're modern and updated. So no reason not to use those. Just kind of as an aside, if you are a small business user or a small business owner, you absolutely need to get one of these. Do not try to work into using some Gmail account or some Outlook.com account. Don't use free email. It's, you have far less visibility into it. It's far less secure. And frankly, it really makes you look bad from a branding standpoint. Just as a small business owner myself, if I get people who email me offering services and it comes from a Gmail account, it just immediately gets deleted. It costs, I think, $6 a month for the lowest Office 365 plan, and then a domain costs about $10 to $15 a year. So it's not like something that is unattainable even for somebody who's trying to start up Scrappy. That's kind of one of those first things you need to get. Also, make sure you're separating personal and work. This might be a little harder up front. With software, it's easier. It might be harder on the hardware side because you only have one laptop and that's your personal laptop. When you are looking at, if you are having to do that from starting your business from scratch, stop thinking of that as your personal laptop and think about it as your work laptop. So think about this has my keys to the kingdom for the business that I'm pouring my life into, or I'm going to continue pouring my life into. And so treat it less like you would maybe a throwaway personal device, and treat it a little bit more like a sacred business device. On the software side, set up different apps for your work email versus your personal email. So if you do go with Microsoft Office 365, and let's say you are a Mac user, use the mail.app that comes with Mac for your personal device, but download off Microsoft Outlook for your work email, and keep those in 2 separate apps. Keep your files separate in different folders and separate cloud storage as well. So separate them out as much as possible, so that when you do graduate to that point where you are building out your business infrastructure separate from your personal stuff, it's just easily carved out and moved, rather than having to go intricately file by file and trying to figure out which one is personal and which one is business. Onto cloud storage, that's very similar to the email and Office Suite one. You want to make sure that you're using something that is reputable, and you want to make sure you're using the business version of that service. So if it's free, then it's that's really not what you want to be using in business. We have a saying in the technology world that if a service is free, you're not the client, you're the product. They're collecting data from you, they're selling that to somebody else. Companies just don't give this stuff away for free. So they're making money off you somehow, it's just not directly from you. So if you pay for this directly, then that company is more likely to see you as a customer and not as part of the product. This is well known with Google, the Google free version. Google actually mines all of your email for data, and they sell that to other companies, and they use that to advertise stuff to you. So it's a bit concerning if you have sensitive business stuff in there that another company would be doing that. On the cloud file storage front too, if you do have a reputable email and Office suite like Microsoft Office or Google Workspace, you probably have cloud file storage included with that. So you don't really need to go get a Dropbox or something else, unless you have business processes that are very, very attuned to Dropbox, or if you work in an industry or with other business partners where they use Dropbox considerably and not Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive. That might be more advantageous to use something like Dropbox or Box or one of the other reputable brands there. So consider that you might be spending money that you don't need to be spending if you have, say, Microsoft Office 365 and Dropbox. So that's a good way to keep your costs down a little bit. I think, yeah, that's it. Okay. So as we're kind of going down to more esoteric apps, we step in, out of those very generic things like office suites and email and stuff like that, into things that a lot of companies need, but maybe they don't all use. Things like accounting and finance apps, marketing apps, CRM or customer relationship management apps. And some of these would even blend down into your very industry specific apps as well. I know we have an app that's very specific to our IT service management business that is a CRM, and it's how we track all of our interactions with clients, but we track them in a way that, when they put in tickets and we do projects, we can go back and look at all the work we've done for them, not necessarily every email that we've sent to them or something like that. So we're a little bit more concerned about what the previous work has done. But if you're a marketing firm, or if you're working from a marketing standpoint, maybe you do want to look at all of those very broader emails that you're trading with those potential clients, prospects, or clients. And that might lead you to pick out more of a generic business CRM tool. But there's marketing apps out there that allow you to maintain emailing lists for just notifying your clients of things, or sending newsletters to interested parties. accounting and finance, like I mentioned up front, with things like QuickBooks and tracking your accounts and your cash flow and stuff like that, and making budgets. Those are all out there. No, for a lot of these, in a general business sense, there are industry leaders. Like, we hate QuickBooks, completely in our business, but it's still the industry leader, so we have to deal with that. We even use it internally. Marketing, there are email list tools out there like Constant Contact and MailChimp. There are social media management platforms like Hootsuite and Buffer that you'll need to look into if you want to manage all those internally. When you're doing these things, you might ask other business owners what they're using. Use the resources available to you to kind of find what services are out there, what services are well known and are accepted by a lot of folks. The bigger ones have a much more likely chance that they will be well supported and secure than some esoteric one that kind of the fell off a box truck on 630 mentality. And so you might ask around if you're in networking groups with other business owners in your industry or other business owners in your geographic area. Those are good places to kind of poll and see, what other people use for this. And then industry specific apps, you very much want to look into these very specifically. Like I mentioned before, with the client that we're working with and the compliance management app that just, refused to play with a very specific compliance framework that they have to deal with. You do want to put some more time into researching those industry specific apps. As applications become more esoteric and very kind of pinhole specific to industries, the less likely they are to really spend a lot of time securing those. So in some of those, you might need to get a third party to come help you secure that app a lot more than you would, say, a QuickBooks Online or a Google Workspace or something along those lines. So kind of from the top of the email and Office suite, you probably have to spend a little bit less time because those are sort of easy targets. But as you get further down into industry specific, you're probably going to want to spend more time focusing on that and even getting some outside help in figuring out how that works. You don't have to, you don't have to know every single intricacy of how these apps are secured or how they work, but the more you know, the better of a decision you'll be able to make. And sometimes just by absence of anything just stellar out there, you're going to probably have to pick the least of evils in the latter case. Another thing too to think about as you're using these kind of applications is to understand what type of information you're putting in there. So if you're thinking about your email, what do you send an email? If you're thinking about your mailing list, what are you putting in a mailing list? Is that sensitive information? Is that marketing? Is it brand awareness? Is it things like that? If you're not putting sensitive information in there, then you don't have to think, as in depth about, how secure this thing is. If you are putting more sensitive information in there, like your financial app, you probably want to do some more effort into making sure that's secure. And even industry specific apps, if you're plugging in a bunch of very sensitive data into that, like personally identifiable information or protected health information or trade secrets or something, you want to make more sure that that's secure before you just start wholly putting that sensitive information in there. All right, so that's the selecting our hardware, software, and services. Now let's talk about securing those, and I think this is probably the beefiest part of the presentation. And there's a lot here. Just know we're not going to talk about everything. There's a ton more to talk about. What I wanted to do with this was hit the high points and kind of put you in the right mindset as you're going forward with these. And so we'll talk about securing computers, tablets, online services, and then some more complex things, but that are still very necessary in an early startup or small business, such as data backup, disaster recovery, and then some administrative measures that you need to think about as you are getting started in business. So with securing your computers, the most important thing you can do is install patches regularly. And so the easiest way to do this for most folks where you don't have any kind of IT function, either internal or outsourced, is to turn on automatic updates on all of your systems. This is probably enabled already to some extent, but it does not hurt to go through and review those settings to make sure they are compatible with what you want. And the more automated this is, the better, because no matter how much you think you'll go in there and do that, any kind of manual process is usually going to get forgotten or kind of bypassed when times are busy. And we'll go through some screenshots here in a minute to show where those are on both Windows and Mac. But the next thing you need to do is enable full disk encryption, and this is very important if you are using portable systems like laptops, which most people do these days. If you have a laptop and the disk is fully encrypted and that laptop is stolen, then all you have to do is replace the computer. If that computer is stolen, but it is not fully encrypted, then you have a data breach. And depending on what kind of data you have, you might have state or federal reporting requirements. So I always, tell people that, an encrypted laptop that's stolen is a insurance claim to get a new laptop. An unencrypted laptop that's stolen is 10, 100 times the work to go through breach reporting and all that kind of stuff. And frankly, at the level of a new business, that is probably just going to be the end of your business. So there's a little bit more work to do there. That's not enabled by default on either Windows or Mac, but we'll walk through that here in a sec. And finally, you want to enable the firewall. And this is very important, especially if you are working in a lot of places. Like if you are the kind of stereotypical startup founder in a coffee shop sort of deal. You definitely want to make sure that you have that firewall enabled when you're connecting to other networks that you cannot fully trust. So even when you're at home, if you have kids or something like that, can you really know what your kids are doing on your network? Kids these days are way smarter than we give them credit for. So they don't understand a lot of why you're trying to protect that stuff, but they could certainly cause problems in there. So even when you are on a network that you think is trusted, it may be beneficial to turn that firewall on. And these are probably already enabled on both Windows and Mac, but again, like automatic updates, it's good to go check and verify. And so as we're going through these we got 3 screenshots here. On the left is the Windows one, on the right is the Mac OS one. And it's the left is Windows 11 and the right is Mac OS. I think it's a Mojave. I think whatever the latest one is. But on the left, if you go to Start menu and settings, and then in that menu that pops up there, go to the bottom and click on Windows Update. That will show you what it looks like on the screen now. If you go to Advanced Options, then you can configure timing and reboots and all that kind of stuff. And Windows has actually gotten pretty good about not just demanding that you reboot in the middle of something important. It'll give you options to delay that, and it'll try to figure out when your computer is least being used. So if you can go in there and tweak those configurations, you should be good to go. On a Mac, very similar. You can go in there and kind of check all those boxes and say do everything automatically. You will have to approve some things. So you'll get a pop-up in the window in the top right of most computers that says, hey, there's updates to apply. Do you want to apply them now? And you can hit that. And you can see I've got one waiting there to apply here on my own computer. But those are fairly straightforward. Just know that This is one of the most important things that you can do to secure your system, is to make sure it is being regularly updated. And that's another reason that you know, when you buy a computer, make sure you're getting a newer computer. You don't have to get the brand newest one, but don't buy a 5, 6, 7-year-old computer, because you do want to make sure that your software is still being updated regularly and that the hardware will accept that new software. Both Windows and Mac will draw a line and say, no, we won't support these models of systems anymore because they're just too old. And if you can't patch it, that's even worse, because that's just open holes that you know that are there that somebody can, you know, willingly come and take advantage of. So it's the reason why we don't still use Windows 7 or Windows 8 and things like that. Full disk encryption, same place in both of them. Windows, start menu settings, Apple menu, system settings. On Windows, if you go down to the one right above Windows Update, Privacy and Security, and then click on Device Encryption, you can turn that on. After that, though, you'll need to go to Explorer and right click on each drive in there. Most of the time that's just going to be your C drive, and that's where your operating system and all your data is. If you right click on that, you'll get a menu that says Enable BitLocker, BITLOCKER, and that will turn that on for that specific drive. So you do have to do 2 steps here, kind of turn on BitLocker as a whole, and then go to the individual drive and turn that on. It may ask you to do, you know, to save some backup codes. It may ask you to put a password in there. Just follow the instructions. It's fairly simple. Once you do turn it on, you don't have to stop working. It'll encrypt everything in the background while you continue to work. But once that's fully encrypted, if somebody walks out with your computer or breaks a window and steals it out of your car, they need your password and everything to get in there. They can't just pull that hard drive out of the system and look at everything on it, which if it's not encrypted, I can just rip the hard drive out of your computer, plug it in somewhere else, and I've got access to all your data. I don't need a password or anything. That's how it works. On the Apple side, once you go in and you turn on File Vault, that just does everything there. So if you go in there and click the button where it says turn off there, I've turned it on long ago. So that'll say turn on if you don't have it turned on. But hit that button and it just encrypts everything from that point. Same thing on as with Windows, you don't need to stop working and let it encrypt. You can continue to work while it's encrypting. And it'll do its thing and finish up silently in the background. For both of these, like I said before, full disk encryption is not on by default. So this is something you deliberately need to go and do. And on the firewall, same place in both, start menu and settings, and Apple menu and system settings. You go in there, privacy and security on Windows, and then click the Windows firewall submenu, or sorry, the firewall and network protection submenu. And you can see in there for domain network, firewall's on, private network and public network, it's on as well. This is just a delineation that Microsoft makes. If you've ever plugged in a new wired network connection into a Windows system, it'll pop up that blue banner on the right side of the screen and ask you to classify the network you're connecting to. That's what the domain versus private versus public delineation is. And you just want to make sure that your firewall is on for all of those. On the Mac side, system settings and then network, then there's a little firewall submenu there that you can go check and make sure that that's active. There's not as much complexity on the Mac side. The Mac doesn't have the public versus private versus domain delineation. It's just all the same. But really on the Windows side, there's not really a huge difference. It's just that's a delineation they've made and years ago, and they won't back down from that. Not a negative thing. It's just how Windows divides their stuff up. But just go verify that both are on. They should be on for everything, unless you've deliberately turned them off, or somebody has anyway. Okay, so moving on from that, you will need to install some antivirus or endpoint protection. This is very important for you specifically, but also as you're growing as a company. I'll have people say, well, I trust myself to not click on something, or I trust myself to not open something. And then I'll say, well, do you entrust every employee that you will ever hire into your company to do the same? And then they kind of go, oh, yeah, good point. So you want to choose an antivirus or endpoint protection, or antivirus and endpoint protection solution that fits you. There are a few out there that that we like. There's a few that have both antivirus and endpoint protection that we use. Currently, we use the Bitdefender Gravity Zone, and that gives us antivirus, which is kind of commodity. There's not really a better or a worse antivirus out there at this point, but it also adds on that endpoint protection functionality where we can go in and we can filter content. So we can say, no, you can't go look at pornography sites, or no, you can't go to gambling sites or download hacking tools. And while you think, well, my people aren't going to go to pornography sites or anything like that, there's plenty of bad guys out there that will try to dupe your unsuspecting users into clicking on things that might fall into those areas. And that's just another layer of defense, saying we're going to prevent this system from being able to go to any of these sketchy categories of sites on the internet. We also have device control, where we can say, okay, you can't plug in a USB storage device. So you can't plug in a thumb drive that has anything on it. And that prevents thumb drive based malware from being introduced into the computer, but it also prevents people from walking in and copying a bunch of sensitive information off to a thumb drive and then taking it and doing nefarious things with it. You can do all sorts of other device protection there as well, but the biggest one for us is preventing that thumb drive use. And that's important to many of our clients, and they ask for it very deliberately because they want to make sure that patient information isn't being taken out of their environment. And finally, there's application control, which allows us to say what can and can't run on that computer. And we don't use this as extensively. We use this as kind of a mitigation for some vulnerabilities that pop up, but they don't have an actual remediation, a patch for. But if you wanted to take something like this and use it, you could say, okay, we can't, you're not going to run anything from user folders or something like that, which is a common tactic of malware. Malware that attackers use is to load up in your downloads folder and run from there. But if you prevent stuff from running from there, then you've prevented some percentage of malware from even being able to work from the start. So there's a lot of opportunities here in the endpoint protection, which is somewhat of an extension of antivirus, but all antivirus platforms don't have that. So I would highly recommend to go and research your antivirus from that standpoint, but also from a central management standpoint. As you grow, you'll want to be able to see all of your users' computers and how they're updated, if they've got any kind of reported malware or annoyingware on them. And you want to be able to see this from a central management console, because again, you don't want to have to trust your users to report every single thing out there. You want to be able to go see that. And we manage 700-800 endpoints across all our clients. We don't, all of those end users are not going to call us every time they see a pop-up on the screen. And frankly, we don't want them. We want to look at that ourselves and say, is this important or is it not? Is this a false positive, or is this something we should truly investigate and go see what's wrong here? But it also allows us to enforce these policies to be implemented across all of the computers. And the end users can't make any changes to it because frankly, it's not their computer, it's the business's computer. Next, install and use a password manager. These are very important, and still people don't understand or know about these as much as they should. Password managers help prevent a lot of account takeover attacks by enforcing better password hygiene in the users. if you use a password manager, what that allows you to do is store very strong passwords in a way that you don't have to remember them. And you're able to access them in most cases through any device, your phone, your laptop, your desktop computer, with ease there. It adds extra protection on there. So you want to use things like two-factor authentication. You want to use very strong passphrases for your account. But at the same time, it makes it much easier for your end users to use strong passwords and not reuse passwords. So don't use the same password for every service. That's a huge problem in how that's how a lot of accounts are compromised, because somebody uses the same password on their Spotify account as they do on their work account or their personal email or their banking account. And as soon as that Spotify account is breached, then you just kind of have to assume that the attacker is going to get their email next, and then a bank or something like that. So that password reuse one is just a huge problem that we run into lately. Actually, lately, it being like the last 7 years. And then finally, you want to limit that installed software on there. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, least functionality. If you're not using it and if it's not giving you value, you should not have it installed on there. So, if you're an avid Chrome browser user, you don't need to have Firefox and Opera and every other browser in existence out there. You just need to have Chrome. If you're a very avid Office, Microsoft Office Word and Excel user, then you probably don't need to have LibreOffice or Corel WordPerfect and all sorts of other things installed on there. So over time, we might install software and not use it any longer. Go back and uninstall that. Once you do become big enough to be managed by an IT function, either internally or externally, then there's additional tools that people like us can look at and say, okay, hey, you've got all this on there. We're going to go remove all this old software or software that's not supported anymore, like Adobe Flash or Internet Explorer. We can go and kind of look at those at a macro level and remove those, because any software that you have installed that you're not using is providing you no value, but it's adding risk. So you've got risk without reward, which is not a good kind of risk to have. Okay, that's kind of some very, very basic stuff on securing your computers. We could talk for days on that, and we'll hit a little bit more to guide you on making more in-depth decisions for policy and technical controls later. But I just wanted to get some high-level stuff out there. Another thing we want to talk about is tablets. A lot of people are using tablets more frequently instead of computer workstations. So things you could do on a tablet to better secure that is definitely use a PIN. And if you have any kind of biometrics like fingerprint or Face ID, then use those as well on that for access, for the get-go. So use that, don't allow anybody just to walk up and turn on your tablet and be able to access anything on there. But at the same time, if you've got more sensitive areas, like if you have an app for your bank on there, make sure that uses an additional PIN or biometrics to give them access to that. If you have email or something like that that's sensitive, then do that as well. You might not be that concerned about your personal email, but if you can turn that on for your business email app, that might be beneficial to better securing that as well. And that actually goes back to adding a good reason to have two separate apps for business and personal stuff if you do have to use the same tablet for personal and business stuff. So, make use of that to the greatest extent you can. Also, only use reputable app stores. For the time being, on Apple devices, you can only use the Apple App Store, so there's really no options there. But with Android, there's a ton of app stores you can add into there, and there's a lot that aren't very reputable at all. And even the reputable ones have malicious apps in them. Google doesn't do as good of a job at keeping malicious apps out of the Google Play Store. that Apple keeps out of, or does at keeping malicious apps out of the Apple App Store. Not to say that Apple's perfect, because there's still stuff that comes through. So you have to be discerning in anytime you're using that. But the more reputable of an app store you use in the beginning, the more likely what you get from those app stores is to be secure. In that same thing, also as you're searching for apps to do something, investigate those apps to make sure they are what they say they are. You know, if you are going to download the QuickBooks app, make sure that that's published by Intuit and not, you know, some other thing meant to look like QuickBooks, but is not really the QuickBooks app. So you do have to, you know, use a little common sense and go through there and dig deeper, and not just look at something and say, oh, that's the QuickBooks app, so I'm going to download it. We can't be sure, you know, that all of these stores are going to put the reputable apps above unreputable apps, and very specifically, there are ads whenever you search for anything, and so all it does take is an ad purchase to get my unreputable app above the reputable app, and maybe fool some people into downloading that and copying up credentials that I can use to steal money from you. When you're looking and digging into those apps before you install them, look at the permissions that they're asking for. So know what those apps should be asking for, and if the ask is too egregious, then that might be a reason not to install that app or to go find another service. You can also just disallow some permissions to those apps outright. So, you know, why does the QuickBooks app need access to the camera, location, and microphone? It might need that. You know, I take pictures of receipts in my QuickBook app on my phone, but why does it really need access to location? Well, probably not. You know, that might be helpful if they were to say, hey, is this fraudulent or what? But frankly, QuickBooks, that's not what QuickBooks does. And QuickBooks doesn't need access to your microphone. So if that's asking for those, then you can easily go turn those off. But other things like permissions to use specific types of information is not so easy to turn on and off. So that might be a deal breaker with using that specific app. And then kind of along the same lines of don't install it if you're not going to use it, not going to get value out of it, limit the number of installed apps that you have. You know, don't be anorexic or anything with what you're doing just to try to keep these, you know, super limited, but make sure that if you have an app installed, that it's bringing you a benefit and not just adding a risk for no reason. Here's a couple screenshots. On the left is Android, and on the right is Apple when you're looking at the app permissions. And this gives you an idea of kind of the what it's looking for there. And this is a little bit more on the information side and you know what it can do with that data that you're providing to that. The one on the left is Android Auto. It should be significantly less permissioned. The one on the right is TikTok, to give you a little scare. They hoover up a lot of information that's directly linked to you. So, you know, even though you might look at that and go, man, I like watching TikTok videos, you know, take a look at what they're doing with the data that you're giving to them, and that might give you a little bit of a second an idea to second guess that. Okay, data backup. This is a very important thing that a lot of small business owners getting started out don't think of. And there's a lot of characteristics that we want to look for here, but you do have to think, what kind of data do I have? And how would I get access to this if there's a catastrophic failure of something? Say, you lose your computer, or your workstation dies, or something along those lines. And if you look at that, there's kind of some ways to skirt by without having formal data backup. If you do have like a cloud-based file sync like Dropbox or Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive, but I really don't recommend depending on that for very long. It gets harder as you get more files to restore them because a lot of the restoration is file by file, whereas with a true data backup service, you can go and restore things, as a whole. You have some level of versioning with OneDrive and Dropbox and Google Drive, but it's not as significant as with a formal backup program. And the versioning is important too, because if you get hit by something like ransomware, and ransomware, your ransomware data is just going to be written over and over and over. And so after a certain period, you have no uncorrupted or unbreached version of that data to go back to. Whereas with a true data backup system, you can set that, and you can set how much you want to keep. You have to keep this for, a month or 7 years or something like that. And so if you do have outside requirements that tell you have to keep data like this, like if you're working in financial management or something, then the federal government requires you to keep financial decision data for 7 years. So it might be just absolutely required that you get some sort of formal data backup there. But if you're just getting going, then you can depend on that cloud sync for a little while, but I would not stretch that too far. And when you're looking at a true data backup platform, you want to look at something that's periodic and automatic. So you want it to do its thing on a certain timer, and you want it to do it without you having to interact with it. Like I said before, if you have to do anything manually, you're probably going to forget it more times than not. And that's going to kind of nullify any benefit that you get from that system. You also want to keep this logically separate from the file system. So a lot of people think, well, I'll just get an external hard drive and plug that in. Well, that external hard drive gets plugged in and left. And then when something happens to that data, like ransomware or some sort of corruption event, you've lost it because it does not have logical separation from your current file system. So while a lot of people think, well, I'll just throw it on an external hard drive, that is not a really good solution in any way, shape, or form. Even in cloud storage, like I mentioned, it can work in a pinch, but it's going to take you a lot longer to restore those things than if you had a true data backup system. And you also want to be able to restore from multiple points in time, not just because of things like ransomware are going to, that's going to overwrite your files, and then your backup will overwrite and overwrite and overwrite and overwrite. But let's say you messed up a file, or an individual file got corrupted, and you only use that file once a month. Well, what happens next month when you come back to do this, critical business file, and you can't get in, or all the numbers are wrong for some reason? Then you need something to be able to go back to 30 days ago and pull that most recent uncorrupted version out. Administrative measures, these are things that they might seem a little bit bigger than a tiny brand new small business, but there's stuff at least you need to be thinking about. Things like cyber insurance. This has become more and more important lately, and just in the last 2 years, pretty much every one of my clients has said, hey, can you come help me figure out the cyber insurance thing? And we'll go talk to their insurance agent with them and make sure that they're getting the right level of insurance with the right requirements. And cyber insurance will levy some requirements on you, mostly things like encryption and two-factor authentication for all of your cloud-based accounts. But it's well worth it to get this kind of stuff, because they provide more than, they don't just throw money at you if you get breached. They actually provide professional services to help you get through the breach, like attorneys and forensic investigators and things like that. Policy and process documentation. This is something that you need to be at least thinking about from the get-go. You might not need to start documenting this necessarily on day one of your business's existence, but it is something that you need to consider as you're hiring employees and as you're bringing on new clients. If you are in an area, in an industry that is particularly sensitive to cyber breaches, then something like a documented cybersecurity policy for your company will go a long way in making your prospective clients more easy or feel more easy about working with you. Process documentation, as you grow in people, it becomes vital that you have processes documented so that it's not just kind of tribal knowledge being passed from one person to the other. When you hire somebody, you can say, hey, here's our process for doing A, here's our process for doing B. You need to follow these. And keep those documents updated and living to make sure that they match how that thing works in your business. But when you document these operational processes, when you document these support processes like hiring and firing and collecting, information for benefits and stuff like that, if you write those down from that operational standpoint, then you can look at them from a security standpoint and say, hey, here's a potential weakness in how we are hiring somebody and how we're granting accounts to them so they can do what they're supposed to be doing in the business. Let's see if we can tighten that up somehow. And so you can really look at that process from a kind of an antiseptic standpoint and say, how do we need to improve this, or what do we need to do to make sure that that we're doing this in a more secure manner, even if it's not a security process in itself. So think about that kind of on all your processes. And just from one business owner to another, the more processes that you document and the more that you get out of your head as the business owner or out of the head of a few knowledgeable people, the more likely your business is to grow seamlessly and effortlessly, because you'll be able to add more people and it's not going to be painful. I generally call this going from a personality-driven business to a process-driven business. It's not all about you and all the stuff that's stuck in your head as a business owner, but it allows you to take vacations and eventually retire someday, and your business doesn't go away when you want to go away. And then finally, emergency planning. And this is very important, kind of along the same lines as that policy and process documentation. So maybe not necessarily that absolute first day, but it's something you need to think about. And the two big ones here, incident response and disaster recovery. Incident response, how do I handle an incident, a cyber incident that happens? How do I get out of this? And disaster recovery, if we have, a catastrophic failure of something, the building burns down, or half of my staff get COVID or something like that, how do I recover from that? And both of these are meant to be written at a time where you're thinking clearly and writing down very distinct and easily followable processes and guidelines, and not having to wing it when you are running around with your hair on fire. That's really the points, in case of emergency, break glass sort of thing. And the more you put time into just defining those up front, the less you have to worry that I missed something in the middle of a catastrophic situation, which you're not going to be thinking clearly in those situations. So better to have it planned up front than have to figure it out in the middle of the fire. Let me make sure. Yep, good to go there. Okay. So next one we want to talk about is working from anywhere. In this sense, as a small business owner myself, we have an office here in Little Rock Tech Park in downtown Little Rock, but I frequently work from other places. So I want to make sure that I'm secure when I work from there. And I have to think about that from a network side and a physical side. And so when I'm thinking about it from a network side, I am looking at how I'm connecting to the network, how I'm connecting to the internet mostly. Am I doing that through a risky public Wi-Fi setup? And if so, how can I better secure that, or how can I avoid that totally? If I want to avoid that totally, I can connect through a mobile data hotspot. So a lot of times this is built into your phone, but you can also get separate devices. This actually is the more secure way to do it, because it takes you out of the realm of anything that most people are going to be able to use to attack you in that coffee shop or in that airport or hotel or library or wherever you are. But this is probably the more expensive one. You do have to spend a little bit more to get this freedom, and it's limiting. If you are a heavy user of things like Zoom meetings or a lot of multimedia, you will run through that data very quickly. So it can be very expensive, or it can be even more expensive if you do a lot of data heavy functions. Another thing you can do is use that risky public Wi-Fi, but layer a secure VPN service over there. And so what this will do is create a secure tunnel from you out to some cloud service. And you want to make sure that cloud service is reputable. So this is probably one of the harder ones to go find the reputable ones, because there are a lot of kind of fly-by-night, drive-by sort of places. But ask around, ask your tech friends, what VPN service do you use? And try to get an idea there. But this is going to be considerably cost effective. From a mobile data hotspot, you might spend $70 to $80 a month to have that, whereas a VPN service might cost you $5 to $10 per month. And you're not having to bring your own data, but you are layering security on top of that risky public Wi-Fi service. So just as a kind of what we're looking out for here, if I wanted to attack Wi-Fi users at a coffee shop or a library or something like that, there are devices out there built for people like me who can take advantage of other people's being in a hurry or not knowing how things work. This little device here that you see is called a Wi-Fi pineapple. Very common tool. Most of us in cybersecurity have some form of this, but they come in different forms. But you don't even need this. You can get a laptop and run some software on there and do the same thing without having an external device. The external device just makes it much easier. And so I can do things like, sit down in a coffee shop. I can kick you off the Wi-Fi that and force your laptop to connect back to my Wi-Fi that's evil. If you had a wireless hotspot, then I would not be able to do anything really here without you knowing. If you were on a VPN, it would kick you off that VPN and force you to try to reconnect. And if you did connect through and if you were connected to my evil Wi-Fi and you could still connect to your VPN provider, then there's an almost certain chance that I'm not going to be able to do anything to subvert your encrypted connection out of my attempt to hack you. So you are, pretty much, kind of like, 90-95% there out of being able to be attacked if you use either one of those methods. But something like this, you'll see people that will kind of do funny things like this at a airport or something. You might pull up your phone and see, FBI van or free Wi-Fi here or something like that, where people are trying to, not really be elusive about it, but just kind of see what they can do. And none of this is really illegal. If you're not using this, in true nefarious manner, then these folks aren't doing anything illegal. You connected to them voluntarily. And so there's not a whole lot of retribution that can be done here. So you've really got to watch out for yourself. On physical security, kind of two areas to think about is when you're in one place working or when you're traveling between places. And when you're in one place working, if you are in that untrusted environment, then you do have to be more cognizant about people who are around. A lot of people think, well, somebody's going to come by and shoulder surf me. Well, that's kind of the least of your worries. Actually, if you're sitting in a coffee shop by yourself and you have to get up and go to the bathroom, or you go pick up a coffee order and you turn around and your laptop's gone, That's more of what I worry about, is that physical theft. So kind of a couple of things. If you're working by yourself and you've got to go do something, pack everything up and take it with you. If you're going to the bathroom, pack everything up and take it with you. If you have somebody else you can work with that's trusted, definitely go with them, because that frees you up to worry about it a little less, and you have some more freedom there. But ultimately, you just need to know what environment you're in. If you're here at the tech park, this is a very shared environment, but our office is on a secure floor. So we're not too worried about people walking out with things. But there's a lot of people that work down on the second floor who are in situations like you may be, as starting up a business right now. They have to be cognizant of that, because that area of the building is open to the public most of the work hours of the day. If you're in a coffee shop, just consider that completely untrusted. If you are at an airport, it's even more untrusted. So just know your environment, know the risks that are there. When you're traveling, be mindful of where you are. If you're in the Little Rock area and you frequent the river trail, just know that places like that are common places where people will come break windows and steal stuff out of cars. If you are, driving home, the rule of thumb in my head, if I'm gonna leave here and drive to my house and I'm not going to go anywhere in between, then it's okay if I throw my backpack in the back seat, because I'm going to be in front of it driving home the whole time. And the only time I'll be out of the car is when I get home and I grab my backpack and take it in my house. But if you are stopping at the grocery store, or you're stopping to eat something on the way home, or you're going to have a drink with a friend or something like that, stick that backpack, that computer bag, out of sight, out of mind. Anything that looks like it could be valuable to a thief, stick that in the trunk, hide it under the seat, do something, just to keep it out of sight of that person who might opportunistically want to break your window and see what's in there. And also make sure your doors are locked. This is one thing I would not really have thought of. But there's a lot of people here in Arkansas that are still very trusting. My neighbors moved from a more rural area, and it took them a while. It took them their cars getting broken into a few times and stuff stolen before they learned to lock their doors. But just kind of be mindful about that. Know where you are, know the situation you're in, and take precautions appropriately. And now the last part, we kind of talked about a lot of stuff that you need to keep in mind for now, as you are where you are, just getting started, or not having started yet, or in the beginning stages of building and operating your own business. But you also have to keep thinking about securing while you're growing. And there's things that you might change into as you're growing. That we've kind of hinted on a little bit already, but I'll hit very deliberately now. First and foremost is infrastructure. You may or may not have a very formal infrastructure, but whether you have a very formal one, you're going to have some infrastructure. And as you get more systems connected to each other, whether they're cloud-based systems, whether they're in an office somewhere, then you need to have more architectural security implemented in there. And this is stuff that you're probably, if you are a financial manager or you're creating a product to sell, it's really not your cup of tea, or really your area of expertise to do things like this. So you may want to look for external help as you're growing at these points, to say, okay, somebody come in and help me from an advisory standpoint to tell me if what I'm doing as a whole is secure, or if all the pieces put together aren't really as secure as what I thought they were. So you want to make sure that you're kind of building that in a secure manner, and not all the pieces talk to each other in a secure way. As I alluded to earlier, you want to think about documenting those processes. And as you are documenting those processes, you want to make sure that they have security considered as you go through them. As you're transitioning from that personality-based or personality-driven business to a process-driven business, documenting those processes gives you a much easier way of ensuring that security is included in there. And so also you got to think about employees. And I hit on this earlier when we were talking about antivirus. When you're thinking about, well, I trust myself not to click on things. Well, do you trust all of your employees not to click on things? And even if you do trust every single employee that you will ever hire until the end of time, employees are not infallible. People will do things that they make mistakes they don't intend to. It's it's completely accidental. But the more you think about how I am handling personnel, the better grip that you'll have on helping them understand what their role is, helping remove those potentials for mistakes in there. And that won't only help you, that will help them as an employee, that will help them grow. And hopefully, as a small business owner, you want to employ these folks and allow them to grow in your business and be a part of your growth. And so doing that and helping them to be a positive part of that is amazing. And the longer you can keep an employee, the less work you have to do to bring a new one on. So, it's kind of like, I just broke in that, recliner and now it's broken. I have to go get a new one and break it in, kind of think about that as with an employee. If you hire an employee and you train them appropriately and get them knowledgeable about how you want to do things and how you see the business growing, the longer you can keep them, the better it is, because just the better they get, the more secure they'll be, the better they understand how things work. So a little bit on the infrastructure. Do you need it? And if you do, I kind of hit on this a little bit already. If you do need on-premises infrastructure, how are you going to build that? That's just, definitely more difficult to build it in an office than it is to just take cloud-based services. But that may just be a decision that you've decided needs to be made that way. But no matter what you do, you need someone to manage it, whether that's an internal IT person or an outsourced organization. And that's what we do for clients. There's a lot of other folks around here and around the country that do that as well. The term is usually MSP, managed service provider. So if you get to that point, you're thinking, hey, I need somebody to come help me and I don't need them full time. Go out and do your research and find that managed service provider that fits well with what you do. When you do build that, you have to think about how you're going to secure that. And this, again, is where it's really good to have someone external to come help, because there's a lot of secure installation guidelines out there. The Center for Internet Security benchmarks are probably the best for non-Department of Defense related organizations to use. They kind of provide real impacting recommendations on configuration items to set and how to build things in a secure manner. If you've been working with ACDC a bit, when they do their assessments, those are all based on Center for Internet Security Controls, which is another tool that's provided by Center for Internet Security. So when I make a recommendation for benchmarks, that is a very reputable organization that's trusted by people in our industry on a daily basis. And as you build that infrastructure out, whether it be on-prem or in the cloud, at some point you're going to need some infrastructure to maintain your infrastructure. Just kind of why you get the little neo whoa down there, because that's kind of that very very meta aspect of that. But we all have infrastructure that helps us maintain our other infrastructure through ensuring patches, giving us accessibility, monitoring for things like CPU, memory, and hard drive usage to make sure that things are being upgraded or replaced when they need to be. So there's a lot of stuff in there that helps us at a macro level maintain that infrastructure. Let me see. Okay, so when we're getting into the process stuff, you definitely want to document processes, but you can go too far. you know, imagine if you were documenting some kind of surgery for a surgeon. Well, there's a lot of things you can probably just assume that that surgeon already knows how to do, like open a patient up and suture them, or, you know, do some kind of laparoscopic operation. Uh, so you don't want to over document things. So think about it, kind of what's your audience for these? Are you documenting for an assembly line of people working in an operations capacity where they might, you know, not have a ton of experience or training in that area? Or are you documenting for somebody who is more highly educated and should be more in tune with these things? As you start to document more complex processes, if you think that you need to document it to a T and get every single option in there, you might be documenting for a long time, and you might have an extremely long process that's not terribly useful. So if you over document somebody for something for someone who should already know what it is, it's less likely they're going to follow that documentation. They're going to follow that process that you've documented for them. But for things like, you know, assembling widgets on an assembly line, it may be more appropriate to spell out exactly how that's done, because you do want an audience to come through there a little bit, you know, and not to be as invested in that necessarily, but a little bit more of that, you know, kind of, you know, plug this person in to do this job today, but tomorrow we're short somebody down the assembly line, and you can easily move them further down the assembly line to a different process because you've got it documented well enough. And then also make sure that those process documents are available when and where they need. Kind of drawing way back to that availability aspect. If you put all the work into these things and it's not available well, with the person who needs it when and where it's needed, then it really doesn't add any value. So if you've got a process that needs to be done by an assembly line worker, that needs to be available to the assembly line worker. If you've got a process that needs to be available to a human resources person, then that needs to be available to them when and where they need it. Now, those processes don't necessarily need to be available to the other person. Like the assembly line person doesn't need the HR process, and the HR person doesn't need the assembly line process. So you can draw some access delineations there, but it needs to be available to who needs it when and where it's needed. Additionally, on I got my papers backwards here, but when you're looking at this from a operational standpoint, this is where you want to make sure that we're integrating security everywhere. That little quote there, "Bake it in and don't frost it on," is something we talked about in the Air Force all the time. We don't need to come after the fact and try to inject security into things. We want to make sure it's a part of it from the get-go. So as you're looking at that operational process, document what it takes to do that operational process, and then immediately look and see where are there security gaps in this. This is one of the things that a lot of people don't think about, is securing your operational or support processes. And they just kind of want to say, hey, the security exists as its own thing outside of the rest of the business, but that's not the best way to do security in a business. And then the security and compliance processes themselves, these might be totally wrapped up in the security and compliance world, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be totally wrapped up in the IT world. There's a lot of security compliance functions that fall to HR and building management and things like that. Physical security aspects. And in these, you want to look for a framework to base a lot of these on. NIST cybersecurity framework, and as I referenced a minute ago, CIS, Center for Internet Security Controls, are both the to me, if you don't have another compliance framework or compliance requirement that's being pushed on you, then these are the two that you go to. And you don't necessarily have to take everything out of these. You can pick and choose. But again, have somebody to advise you that's knowledgeable about these, and they can help you pick which ones that you need. We pick a subset of these. We build a subset of 40 controls out of NIST cybersecurity framework and CIS controls that we work with our clients to enforce where they don't have other compliance requirements. If you do have another compliance requirement, then definitely base everything on that. Like if you're a healthcare client, then you'll probably have to base things on HIPAA. If you're a Department of Defense contractor, then you're going to have something like CMMC and NIST Special Publication 800-171, which those two are going to be way more than NIST CSF or SIS controls. So just be aware of that. But if you don't have anything else, you're kind of in a lucky and an unlucky state. You're in a lucky state in that you can shape your security program by your needs and your needs alone, and you don't have to do a bunch of fluff stuff for somebody else. But you're in an unlucky state that you've got to figure out what your needs alone means. But document these, your everything that you want to implement in a policy, and then document processes based on those policy requirements. So things that are commonly documented as processes are things like onboarding and offboarding. So if you hire somebody, or to be positive, somebody gets a better job somewhere and they leave your company, then you want to make sure that you bring them in and then you let them go in a secure manner. You want to make sure that you've got processes to patch everything. Patching isn't always automated. So you want to make sure that you've got processes to also cover the things that aren't automated. Other things would be like incident response. So you want a process that helps you through an incident. Like I mentioned before, an emergency. In an emergency, you want to be able to get through that incident or that disaster in a secure and calm manner. So document those processes as well. Sometimes those processes will be short, and you can probably get by just putting them in your policy document. Other times those processes are going to be more involved, and you're going to want to create a separate process for them. And as you get bigger and bigger, if you get to very large size, everything is going to be its own little document, and your policy is probably going to be multiple documents. So this is very much a as you get to smaller businesses, then you can kind of build small and then grow from there. But as you build in that mindset, that really puts you in the right kind of place to integrate that into your business more and more. Okay, and then finally, your people. Like I said a couple of times before, you trust yourself, but you are the one as the business owner who puts the most into your business. And my business partner and I talk about this all the time. We want our employees to be a part of that business. We also don't expect them to feel like they own the business. It's like, hey, you come in, you give us 40 hours a week, and we want you to give your best during that 40 hours a week, but I don't want to call you on a weekend. I don't want to call you at night, and things like that. So make sure that when you are, looking at this from a people standpoint, that that you are setting them up for success and not giving them enough rope to hang themselves. But at the same time, realize that people will slip up, and if you are looking out for them, then you can kind of allow them to own that and learn from that. So in certain things, like you want to set boundaries. We talk about kind of how you build processes and check your people out. And a lot of people think, well, okay, I do background checks, I check their licensures, I go back and look at their education and stuff like that. But it's a lot more than that. We want to set the boundaries for them. We want to say, hey, this is what you can and can't do. So this is very much an acceptable use policy. We also want to define how we handle mistakes. So, hey, you make a mistake, and we'll talk to you about it first. If you make that mistake again, we might document that in your HR file. And if you make that mistake again, then we might have to let you go. So we want to define some sort of formal way of of handling mistakes, so that they know, okay, I'm not just going to get the boot if I do the slightest thing. The biggest thing there is, like, It's just if they make a mistake and then they're scared to death that you're going to fire them, then they might try to hide that mistake from you. And the more they hide it, the longer it's hidden, the worse it gets. So you want them to feel open about coming and saying, hey, I made a mistake, I did this. Okay, let's figure that out. Let's handle that. Another one is you want to define roles. So what is your role in the company? That's really hard to do when you're real small because everybody does a little bit of everything. But as you start to grow, you can start to draw those lines between the roles so that people aren't just constantly burdened with everything that falls onto them, and they can start to specialize more in certain areas. But also they know what falls within their scope and what doesn't fall within their scope. And then the validating qualifications and appropriateness for the role is kind of the background check, the employment, the previous employment verification, the education verification. If you have licenses that you have to do a certain role within your company, then validating those licenses and stuff like that. And so just be careful that, when you're doing that, you're doing it appropriately, and you're not you're not integrating things that aren't really necessary for the roles you're hiring for. I think that is it. It is. There's our summary. So we first started, we talked a little bit about the mindset that you need to be in here to kind of get out of that whole antivirus and firewall are enough mindset and think more about the broader aspects of protecting information and managing risk. We talked about buying equipment and software and services for your business, so setting yourself up from the get-go with those physical building blocks, and then securing those systems and services after you've purchased them. For small businesses, how you can more securely work from anywhere, because we know you do, I do. And then finally, as you're getting bigger, how do you secure that business while you're growing? So a lot of what we told you as the small businesses, how can you just get going without spending a lot of money or time? But there's a lot more to it as you do get bigger that you want to think about. And I guess the biggest thing that I'd want to recommend there is have an idea of what you want to do, but look for someone to come help you, because this is the point where you probably got a little bit of cash flow and you can bring somebody in to really help direct you in the right down the right path, so that as you get even bigger, you don't have to go back and undo things that you may not have made the best choice for. And with that, I think we have time for questions.